vision or reality and making sure that things are going accordingly. So welcome back. This is week 10. And up first, we want to also let you know about our parent leader, Whitney Touchton. As many of you know, this particular training is thanks to her community project as a graduate of the Parents Who Lead program. So we're very happy to have utilized this particular platform to share that curriculum through Vamicia Powell, School Climate and Culture Supervisor. The panel. With us today, we have Dr. Diana Green, the Superintendent of Duval County Public Schools, joining us. We also have, on behalf of Mayor Curry, Wendy Benloss, the Executive Director of the Human Rights Commission for the City of Jacksonville. And we have Director Mike Bruno, representing the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, who is the Director of Patrol and Enforcement. So we welcome the three of you here today. And we will also tell you who we are. So I'm Tia Leathers, the Executive Director of Family and Community Engagement for the district.
Hello, guys. I am Vamicia Powell, the Supervisor of School Culture and Climate, and we are so excited that you guys have joined us today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
So I have had the pleasure of facilitating this session for the last 9 weeks. And we started off with this quote, and I want to bring it back full circle for the participants and for, of course, our viewers today. And the quote says, "We like to believe we are open-minded, fair, and without bias, but research shows otherwise." This is an important, even if uncomfortable, realization for most of us. And that particular quote comes from Blind Spots, Hidden Biases of Good People. And it's one of the texts that we've encouraged folks to kind of dig into if they are indeed wanting to stretch their learning farther when it comes to bias. So what is bias? What is bias? First of all, everyone has bias, okay? I want to start there. The actual definition that we're going to go with this today is implicit bias refers to the brain's automatic instant association of stereotypes or attitudes towards particular groups without our conscious awareness. Implicit biases develop over the course of one's lifetime through exposure to messages. Those messages can be direct, such as when someone makes a sexist or racist comment, or they can be indirect, stereotypes that we pick up from watching TV, movies, and the media. So our own experiences will also add to our biases. Like I already stated, everyone has biases. Having implicit biases doesn't make a person good or not so good. Rather, biases develop partly as our brains are trying to make sense of things. And how do we get over them, right? How do we unlearn and relearn? So implicit biases are malleable. Our brains are incredibly complex, and the implicit associations that we form can be gradually unlearned through a variety of de-biasing techniques, okay? And then the last point that I want to make is that we can override our biases. With increased awareness, biases can be managed by breaking the link between the bias and the negative behavior that may come from a bias, which then becomes explicit, right? Overt. Like I've mentioned, we have gone through an extensive study of biases over the last 9 weeks, and I want to do a quick recap, kind of what led us to week 10. So for week 1, we took a journey through discovering the 4 capabilities that makes up the cultural intelligence paradigm. We learned that through exploring each other's cultural values, that we can gain more understanding and then empathy for each other. Weeks 2 and 3, we dove into those 4 capabilities to discover how our drive or our motivation plays a huge role in our multicultural interactions. We learned that we can gain knowledge of other cultures through intentional inquiry and also through interacting cross-culturally, right? And not being afraid of those experiences. For week 4, we learned that to be biased is to be human, and that everyone has the capability to manage their biases. Week 5, we learned how biases manifest itself through microaggressions and how it can be combated through education and then microaffirmations. Week 6 and 7, we discussed the importance of understanding how to use perspective taking. And we also focused specifically on strategies to disrupt bias systems. Weeks 8 and 9, we walked through an action plan that our participants can use to take effective action in managing their bias. And then week 9, we learn ways in which we can manage our bias to impact decisions. So we finally made it to week 10, where we've taken your suggestions. We asked you who you wanted to hear from, what decision makers in our local community that you wanted to hear from, and we were able to bring them to the table. So we're super excited to have them here today. So we're going to get started. Tia's going to get started with our first question, and we're going to dig right in.
All right. So the very first question we have for you all is actually intentional. And I think it's because as leaders of the type organizations that you represent, a lot of times people see you as your role. So we wanted to first start with asking you about who you are as a person. The first question we have for you is, what has been your experience with bias? Are there times when you've experienced bias yourselves? And we'd absolutely like for you to share that with us. If you don't mind, I'll begin with Dr. Green on this question, followed by Ms. Benloss, and then Director Bruno.
Well, thank you, Ms. Leathers. That really is a challenging question because when you experience bias, it's very subtle. That's why so many people don't recognize that they have a bias, because it's done sometimes unconsciously. But the one time I could think of experiencing a bias was when I first applied for superintendent, not for Duval, but for another school district. It was very clear in the feedback that I received that they felt, because of the situation they were in, they were actually going through financial issues, financial trouble, and they felt in uncertain terms that a woman could not help them get out of financial despair. And even though I wasn't hired as the superintendent, I was hired as the deputy superintendent and led the group that got them out of financial despair. So maybe that bias, thinking because I was a woman that I wouldn't know how to put things in place to help the district turn things around financially, they soon figured out that that was not the case, and ended up hiring me as the superintendent a couple years later.
Oh, things that people wouldn't know. Absolutely. And I've been the superintendent now a couple times, a few times over. Awesome. Ms. Benloss, do you have anything similar, or what has been your experience with bias?
Well, I have experienced bias in the field of employment as a female and a minority and an attorney. I have been judged, I believe, people have made assumptions about me based on my race and gender. And instead of, solely judging me on my qualifications and merit. I've also experienced bias in education. I remember when I was growing up in school, and I know things have probably changed today, but I remember my teachers discouraging me from taking math and science courses because I'm female, and the assumption being that males are better at math and science. So that definitely affected the path I chose, my education. And then one more bias is that I actually went back to law school when I was older. And so age is another bias that I faced when I actually finished law school and went into the employment.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. Director Bruno, similarly?
Okay, so I think we all agree that when you're growing up, everyone faces adversity. Everyone faces some level of bias. You mentioned it at the beginning. People sometimes see you as in your role. Sometimes as a police officer, in my interactions with the public, they were expecting to not see a human or somebody that's going to be sympathetic or willing to help them. They from what they've heard of other people's interactions or maybe another experience in a different type of situation, all they see is the uniform. I had a recent conversation with a guy during a traffic stop, and And I stopped him and I talked to him about what I observed and why I stopped him. And at the end of it, he said, and this was really at the peak, this was a couple of months ago, this was really at the peak of some of the conversations going on in the country and certainly in Jacksonville. And he said, the interaction I just had with you is nothing what I expected. And actually, that sparked a whole nother conversation of let's talk, because obviously by him opening up like that, it allows us to have some real dialogue. And so those kinds of things change people's lives. Everybody deals with adversity. The biggest trick is don't let that individual or that instance define you. Allow it to help you grow and learn something from it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your perspective. And I think it's very valuable for us to hear that all three of you have experienced biases, even though you may not have the same educational background or the same walk of life, or even be from the same culture, that you each have experienced that yourselves. Thank you so much for sharing.
So to piggyback on that, I want to ask, what resources are available within your organization or in the community to support stakeholders or employees who might encounter bias? We'll start with Dr. Green, and then we'll go in the same order, if that's okay, or whatever is comfortable for you guys.
No, I am fine.
Okay.
First of all, I think Duval County is one of the school districts that truly has embraced equity. And it starts from the school board, the policies that are passed and generated through the school board. And this school board has developed a very strong policy as it relates to equity. Not every school district has an equity office, which we do. Our equity office does everything from investigations to training, to supporting employees and students as it relates to, bias is not the word I would use. For the equity office, it's more about it's more about equity. Bias, you can have a bias and not be put in a position where, you weren't treated correctly. So we started having conversations with the board, and my conversation with the board is that we take the view of equity more in a reactive. We try to solve it after it's happened. We are moving more towards being more proactive. How about we deal with this when it is at a level that it could be, unintentional bias, or dealing with sometimes people are ignorant to their actions, and that's why we're trying to put forth a director of equity, that this director of equity would work directly with students at schools, because students see the world very differently than we do. And they will tell you what they think much quicker than when we were in high school. And the fact is, they have more tools to communicate. I mean, Snapchat didn't exist when we were in high school. There wasn't Twitter, there wasn't Facebook, none of that existed. And now we have to figure out as adults, how do we engage with this new generation who clearly knows what they want, and they clearly feel that they have a definition of whether it's bias, racism, other isms, genderisms, all the whole spectrum. Our young people want someone to help them communicate or help them, work through these issues. And so we're at a good place, but we need to be better. And there's more that we can do. So this wonderful department called Community Engagement, led by the wonderful Ms. Tia Leathers, plays a role. Our programs, such as the 5,000 role models, these type programs empower our young people, and specifically for our African American males, empowers them to know that they need to be proud of who they are. They need to recognize when they see this and how to deal with it in a professional, effective manner. And I could keep talking, but I'm going to allow others on the
I'm not going to tell you to stop. I don't know who's going to tell you to stop. No, thank you so much for that. And thank you for just kind of reiterating the importance of being proactive, right? When we see that there's a need. Miss Benloss, what about you in the city of Jacksonville?
So the city council has local laws, passed laws, of course, that prohibit discrimination based on a person's protected category. So that would be their age, race, or gender, or any other protected category, and prohibit discrimination in 3 key areas: employment, housing, and in places of public accommodation. Now, a place of public accommodation is simply, an example would be a restaurant or a retail store. So my agency investigates, the Human Rights Commission investigates those type of complaints, and we try to resolve them. And we also prevent bias and discrimination by training. We are a big believer in training employers, training housing providers, and other business owners on the law, and then educating people and the public on their rights. Because we believe that, education, your rights, that's going to go a long way to preventing discrimination. And then this Mayor Curry, he has issued an executive order so that the city will set the example in not having any discrimination in employment. And so that executive order prohibits any type of discrimination in employment by the city and requires the city to reach out for diversity and inclusion among city employment.
Thank you so much. And Director Bruno.
So to answer your question, the first thing is that's really important is we hire our officers from the community that we live in. The majority of our officers live and work in Jacksonville. And so that's a big portion of it, because they certainly become stakeholders on making sure that our community stays safe and that we maintain the relationships that we need through our community engagement and other interactions with the public. So that's a first big step for us is our hiring pool largely comes from people that are from the area or moving to the area. We have sometimes we hire officers and they move into to Jacksonville. We certainly work hard with training. We meet the FDLE standards, so the state standards as well as national standards. We meet those certifications and accreditations. Every year we do a report in regards to any bias-based complaints. So when we get those from the community and there's an allegation of some type of bias-based complaint, we investigate those. And then even at the end of that investigation, we tally them up. Like I said, we take another look at them at the end of the year to see where there's opportunities to do better or to improve those types of conversations. Those bias-based complaints all are routed through internal affairs, which once again is an avenue internally for employees of the sheriff's office as well as externally for the community if they feel like there's something that the officer did wrong, whether it's bias-based or anything. Our internal affairs is always there to investigate those cases. So we work really hard to take a full perspective of it, a 360-degree perspective, and to analyze that and to give our employees as well as the community an opportunity to help us always be better.
Good stuff. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
With that, I think it's a good place to pivot because each of the organizations are service organizations. We are providing a service to the community and to our stakeholders. As leaders, in terms of your internal teams, are there measures that you have taken for your employees or for those that are providing the service? As a leader, have you taken any support or any measures to kind of help the bias that may exist among your internal teams? Is there any work that's happening with employees of your areas to ensure that the service they're providing can be extend it to the public with the minimal amount of bias possible. So I'm actually going to go right back to you, Director Bruno, if we could begin there, and now take the reverse order.
Okay, absolutely. So you talked about internally first. So primarily that's our officers. And we talk about all the time, all of our officers, like I mentioned before, they're trained to the state standards and to the national accreditations. So that includes legal discussions and teaching the law, obviously the First Amendment in that. We also do human diversity training, de-escalation training, and really it boils down to a lot of making sure that our officers have the demeanor and the disposition, the patience and understanding to treat people like people. I'd like to shift a little bit here externally because that is such a huge part of what we do. And when there are some challenging situations or there's protest or whatever, and people are exercising their First Amendment, one of the things that we like to do up front and early is to develop a rapport, because relationships are key. We cannot do community policing, or we can't be in the neighborhoods without a relationship. So when there's a protest or things that we learn about, one of the early things that we want to do is meet with the organizers. What are their expectations of the police? And at the same time, share what our expectations are. Obviously, everybody wants to have the opportunity to have their voice heard, to do it safely and those kinds of things. And that's what we're trying to accomplish. It's not about the message, it's about getting that out there safely. And so we want to work together and develop, like I said, that rapport, and to see if there's some things that we can do in our planning, because planning is key. We try to account for all of the variables in the planning so that on the day of the event, there's no to where somebody did not foresee something or some variable that wasn't accounted for. So we develop those relationships and then really try to work within those.
Awesome. Okay, so and within the bias realm, I will say that the training that we offered has been most helpful. We didn't know about it if it weren't for the parent leader that shared this national certification with us. I have not been trained to be a police officer at all. I did maybe about 15 seconds of it through Leadership Jacksonville, and I don't envy any of you, and I am grateful. But I will say that particular training has really been eye-opening. So I think if we could share some of that background on where that came from and ideas like that, there may be ways to just infuse a couple of those topics therein, because it's something that you just don't know until you're going through it. But I really appreciate you sharing all of the things that you all do. And you're right, the relationship piece, you all encounter bias in so many ways, and just trying to break down that wall and do your jobs. I'm just really, really grateful that you're here to share that.
Right. Yeah, and I wholeheartedly agree with you. It's about having the me walking in your shoes and you walking in our shoes to kind of see what each other needs and to have that relationship and understanding. And we do a lot of stuff. We kicked off another Citizens Academy last night to where people come in and that for 12 weeks, they will see different elements of the sheriff's office and how we function. And so through our community engagement, we do so much. We'd love to do more. Obviously, those resources are finite, but like you said, through Leadership Jacksonville and other places, you get that exposure and then you become our ambassador within the community. And that's worth its weight in gold. So thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Benloss, anything you're doing with your teams?
So one thing first of all, I'm trying to do is to try to be aware of when I have biases in myself, and acknowledging them, and then encouraging my team to also acknowledge them, because as was mentioned earlier, we all have biases. And so, when I encourage them to recognize them and speak openly about them, it kind of takes away the guilt and shame of it. And I think because the guilt and shame stops people from talking about it, stops them from looking for solutions and looking for answers. And so by acknowledging encouraging my team to acknowledge the biases. And then of course, as I mentioned, training is a big key with us. So training my team, and then so we can train others to recognize their biases and not let it affect their decision making and their handling of the services that they provide to the public.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Green.
Well, I think one of the things that I've done is shown my true heart to our employees. Starting in March, when we kind of closed the doors for teaching and learning and went to remote learning, every week I would send out this, I don't know what you want to call it, but it was a Friday letter. And each week I would share a part of my life and things that happen in my life. And the response that I got from our employees was quite amazing, to say the least. And when the incident happened with George Floyd, it was much easier for me to express to the 13,000 employees that we have how that impacted me, and how being an African-American mom of 2 young African-American men and the wife of an African-American male, how each day I have that fear happening to the men in my life. And it definitely took some courage to do that, because I knew that I would probably get not all positive feedback, but the school district knew that I was willing to have that conversation. I was willing to open up and say that, you know, as a school district, we can do better. There are young men in our schools each and every day that could face what George Floyd went through, and we need to reflect on our own practice. Just like it was Wendy said earlier, she had to reflect on her own biases, just like I had to reflect on my own biases. And I was willing to open myself up to our teachers, to our food service workers, bus drivers, everyone, to say, we all have to do better. We all have to figure out how are we going to change what we do in the classroom, or how will I change my leadership style so that I can ensure all students, every single one of our students, has access to high quality education, and that they have potential to be anyone that they want to be. And we all play a role in either helping that dream be fulfilled, or we play a role in squashing that dream. And I was encouraging our staff to do the former, play the role in making that dream a reality for those students. And I also think the other thing that we've done is that we've done a great job of hiring and promoting and ensuring that we are as diverse as our student population. This year, for the first time, we've hired 2 Hispanic principals. Now, one would think that we should have done that before now, but it hadn't been. So this year, 2 schools where 30 to 40% of the students are Hispanic have never had anyone in leadership that looked like them or could identify with them. And so that is very important to me as a superintendent and the leader of this organization, that students can see themselves from the top to the bottom, and that we're all working through our own biases to support them and help them be better citizens for our community.
Very good. And in keeping in this same vein, in terms of this conversation, these are conversations that tend to happen behind the scenes or among close friends, where you can truly talk about it and be able to be transparent about such a topic. As leaders, how do we move this conversation from an internal one to one that is more out in the open, and one that we are continuing to engage people in? I'm going to start with you, Ms. Benloss, because I haven't yet. If you could please chime in terms of just how you can help from your seat move this conversation forward.
Well, I think one thing that leaders can do is to sponsor or encourage community conversations just like this one, and be willing to participate in those conversations as leaders. By being open to having these conversations, leaders can help those who are unaware of how social arrests may be affecting them to become aware and to express themselves, and perhaps decide to be part of the solution. Leaders can also model inclusive behavior by encouraging people to express their opinion. Even if the leader, even if me as a manager, I don't personally agree with what someone says, but then being willing to listen and try to see things from the other person's point of view. And so, basically it's getting people talking, getting people to try to understand each other, and then looking for solutions. And so the Human Rights Commission, we sponsor community conversations. Right now, we're planning to have a community conversation probably next month on racism and policing. We also sponsor what's called study circles, where small groups of people get together and talk about issues and possible solutions.
We would definitely love to partner with you on that and sharing those opportunities with our stakeholders as well. Director, I'm going to come to you. I know that Bishop Guns has been working with us with conversations with some of our students, getting some of our minority males meeting with officers and beginning to build those relationships that you spoke about earlier. I think the first is tomorrow, but just kind of want to find out if there are other things that you all are doing to move these conversations forward.
Absolutely. So we have quite a robust community engagement division down there. That also includes the Police Athletic League, where we have all kinds of classes, sports and other things, and helping people in the community with whether it's homework or anything, just making sure that we are deeply rooted in the community and making a difference. And I said before, our police officers are made up of the community. And at the same time, it's important that our officers treat people fairly, that they treat them with respect. And as I mentioned it before, that opens up the conversations, the dialogue. It allows people to see us in a different perspective, which is helpful, which is exactly what Bishop Gunn is doing, within the community, and has for quite a while now, to open up that dialogue. The other portion of it is all of these interactions also help us continue to be such a great agency. We're one of the best in the country, and people locally sometimes may take that for granted, but having had the opportunity to travel the country and see a lot of agencies, we're very fortunate to have the agency that we have and to be able to serve in the community that we serve in. But as we look down the road, it's these types of interactions, these types of conversations that are going to allow us to recruit and hire other individuals throughout the community, whether it's African Americans, Hispanics, or whatever, some of the underutilized classes. Let's bring them on board. I've said before, be the change that you want to see, and some of the people's understanding or what they think police work is, let them do a ride along, let them get the exposure, the training like you had, and then see if that's something that they would want to do to really make a difference in the community. You can do a lot in the community, but you can also do a lot as a police officer to see that through, to get hired, and then to go back and serve your community and really make some changes that are needed. We'd love to see that. So we look forward to it.
We hear the challenge to be the change.
There you go. Be the change.
Doors are open at JSO. Love it.
Absolutely. We're always hiring.
Dr. Green?
Are you talking about always hiring for officers? Because in case I needed another job, what kind of jobs were they hiring for? But
you've got a great resume. I'm sure we can find something for you. It's whether it's police, corrections, community service, community engagement.
okay.
Hey, we'll be your fallback plan. We'll work this out.
Well, thank you. I'm really excited about some of the things we're doing at DCPS. Our student council, under the direction of Executive Director Timothy Simmons, came together this summer and had the conversation about racism, about what they felt was happening in our schools. And through that conversation, we actually made some changes at a few schools where students felt like they had no voice. They had no one to listen to their thoughts. And so that program led to this whole comprehensive conversation about being more proactive instead of reactive, because our equity office does an amazing job. They ensure that we are implementing those robust policies to ensure that we're giving students every opportunity to be successful. But again, it can only go so far. There has to be this human connection portion of it, and not just making sure you're doing what policy says you're supposed to do. And the conversation with this group of students led to changes at one of our high schools to offer a course in African American Studies. That high school has never offered that course. And this year, for the first year, that course is being implemented because we got the students felt like, even though I'm going to a magnet high school, the other high schools are offering African American Studies. Why can't my school offer it? And we ensured that we had everything in place so that that course is now being offered at that magnet high school. And we're going to continue until every high school is offering courses such as African American history and other courses that will attract students that feel like, I don't know enough about my own history, and they want to know that information. The second thing that we're excited about is the African American task force that we have in place. That task force actually started last year, and that task force is helping us develop African American curriculum in grades K through 12. Yes, we're excited that we have African American Studies at the high school, but what are we doing at the middle school? What are we doing at the elementary school? Our relationships with organizations such as Jasmine to ensure that we are supporting our diverse population, our students, our LGBTQ students, are we supporting them? We're now connecting with the Hispanic Chamber. So we are trying to connect with many outside organizations to support what we're doing inside the school district, because we are a very diverse school district, and we have many facets that we can improve upon for our students, but we can't do it alone. We need outside organizations supporting, just like it was mentioned about Pastor Guns. He's been working with our school, United Way, Communities in Schools, and see, I'm going to start listing and then I'm going to forget someone. But we have so many organizations that are supporting our students in various ways to help them be successful, to help them be the best version of themselves.
Thank you so much. I want to shift to another topic, a hot topic of sorts, and that is disproportionality. And I'm actually going to start with Director Bruno. I know that you're familiar with intelligence-led policing, but I am going to read a small snippet just for the audience's sake, just so that they can get a little bit of a background of what that means. And it says, according to the U.S. Department of Justice, intelligence-led policing is a collaborative law enforcement approach combining problem-solving policing, information sharing, and police accountability with enhanced intelligence operations. It's designed to guide policing activities toward high-frequency offenders, locations, or crimes to impact resource allocation decisions. An important component of intelligence-led policing is that it encourages and depends on collaboration amongst various agencies and the community, including not only police, but other law enforcement like the FBI, Homeland Security, so forth and so on. So my question then is, since national research shows that people of color are stopped by the police at disproportionate rates, do your police officers go through any type of training on managing bias, or do they have to complete a form either intuitively or actually before they make a stop to determine if it's actually intelligence led? Similar to some of the departments, like Oakland Police Department is the one that comes to mind.
So there's a lot of layers to that. So I'll try to
Okay.
touch on every one of them. We certainly get training. I talked about earlier the bias-based training, the human diversity training, as well as other levels of training that we get. So there's certainly training that's in place. In regards to the traffic stops that you're talking about, to stop someone, you have to see a lawful violation. And some people may not realize this, but you can't just arbitrarily stop a car. You have to have some probable cause that allows you to stop the car, whether you've observed a tail light out or something, they ran a stop sign or something along those lines. You cannot just arbitrarily stop the car. You have to have a lawful reason to stop them. Once you stop the car, the officer still has options. And I don't know exactly what is captured in the DOJ data, but for us as police officers, I can stop somebody for a tail light out and give them a courtesy. I can give them what we call like a verbal warning or a courtesy of, hey, listen, you may not have known this, your brake light's out or whatever. I can run their license, make sure that everything is checked out and cut them loose. But we have the option of whether it's a verbal warning, a written warning, or a paying citation. Just because they get stopped doesn't mean that they're getting a paying citation. So there's a lot of things that are behind that, but I do agree with you. There is some great benefit to intelligence-led policing. You're not just throwing a cast net out there and stopping everything that moves. There's no benefit. I talked before about the relationship between police officers and the community. If we're out there stopping everything that moves, you're not going to help that relationship. Whether you give everyone a verbal warning or not, it just is, number one, it's unrealistic, and number two, it's going to harm the relationship. So our officers are looking for a law violation. They're not looking to see, and many times at night you can't tell the race of the driver or the sex of the driver or any of that. They're just out there operating based on probable cause and some observation, and then they'll initiate a stop or they won't initiate a stop, and then it runs its course. So like I said, there's a lot of layers that are there, and we love to give our officers that discretion because, as I mentioned before, just because I see you have a tail light that's out, if I get up there and it's a young mother that is doing her absolute best to try to get by, and you know what, she deserves a break. You know, she's probably never had a break. She deserves that opportunity to fix that tail light and without a paying citation. And if she didn't know it was there, then you know, everybody wins. We're educating, we're making it safer, and at the same time, she gets a break. So there's, like I said, there's a lot of layers and a lot of opportunities to still have the interaction without you know, damaging the long-term community relationship.
Thank you.
Dr. Green, I'll go to you next. In looking at national research, it shows that students of color are disciplined at a disproportionate rate, leading to the school to prison pipeline. What types of ways as a school district are we addressing this?
Yes, this is something that we will continue to get better at supporting our students of color because it's national, but it's also local. Our data reflects the national trend. And part of that still goes back to training such as what you're doing here with unconscious bias. Again, we have to attack the human side of this. We have policy in place. We do restorative justice. We have a committee that looks at our code of conduct. We have a parent representative. We have community representatives. We have all the frameworks in place. But now, again, it's back to the human factor. It's back to that relationship. I think not officer, I'm so sorry.
No, you're good.
Bruno, sure.
Officer Bruno talked about the relationship. If that relationship is not there, all the policy and guidelines in place is not going to limit the same student disproportionately receiving discipline. And again, it starts with training. It starts through the hiring process, making sure that we're hiring individuals that are their minds are open to all students, and that we are giving students every opportunity to correct their behavior. As Officer Bruno said, giving this single mom a break or a broken tail light. We have some classrooms that if you just look wrong, discipline's about to happen. And other classrooms where, someone's going to engage with that student. So we have a lot of work to do in this particular area. And I think that's actually step number one. We have to admit we have a problem. And we're openly admitting we have a problem because disproportionately African American males receive out of school suspensions in this school district. Now, how do we find solutions to that problem? And I think it starts with, again, being open, having training like this. I was thrilled when we saw hundreds of teachers sign up for this training, wanting this training. And then two, reviewing the things that we are doing in our schools, like restorative justice. We still have schools who don't use it to its full potential. And then we have schools that are very successful, and we can see it in their data that they are very successful. And so we have to continue to work through that process. And again, we also have to, each person has to reflect on their own practice. Each person has to ask themselves the question, if this student did this and this student is African American, would I have the same reaction if it was a Caucasian student who did it, or a Hispanic student, or a male student versus a female student? Those are the kinds of things that the human factor plays into. That, we have policy, we have consequences, we have everything in place to react. Again, how do we figure out how to be more proactive and implement those proactive strategies to ensure that our African American male students aren't being disproportionately suspended out of school? Because we know when they're suspended, they're not having access to high quality education. When they're not having access to high quality education, they get behind, they struggle, then they start thinking, this is the best I can do. And it just goes down a very dark path that doesn't benefit that student's family, our school district, nor our community.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Ms. Benlos, I'm going to ask you a similar question. And I think as it was written, it talked about people of color, but I do want to think about just marginalized people in general, not just people of color, but also women, right? And maybe a male-dominated company. I also want to think about those that don't identify as straight and those that might be older in some of these settings. So my question to you is, what are the issues that marginalized people report in the workplace that make them file a discrimination complaint? So kind of what are you seeing come across your desk, and what can companies do to ensure that all people are working in a discrimination-free environment?
Well, certainly we see complaints that are based on race and LGBTQ complaints. And, some of the most common complaints are what a lot of employees complain about, or people who are trying to obtain a job, simply being denied a job, not being hired, and being fired for, like Dr. Green mentioned, for things that perhaps a white employee would not be fired for. Unequal pay and benefits, and discipline that they feel is unequal or unfair. So we all know that there's still a gender gap in as far as pay in the workplace. So that continues to be an issue, and an issue that LGBTQ folks are not being hired, or they're being discriminated against in the workplace. So what employers can do, as we heard from two employers today, the district and JSO, they both do a good job with some of these suggestions. First of all, is having an anti-discrimination and a harassment policy. But it's not enough just to have a policy. It needs to be neutrally and consistently applied to all employees the same way. And then getting back to training supervisors, training managers on that policy. And then employers should have a complaint process, and then take action to investigate and remedy any complaints that come to them of discrimination or harassment.
Awesome. Well, thank you all very much. We definitely are working to try to keep the panel to the hour that we've asked of your busy schedules. And of course, as the school system, you can imagine everything that we do and everything that we're about is hopefully to be able to support a better community for our children. I want to say to live in, but then the English in me won't allow that preposition to dangle on the end in that way. So anyway, for our children. And with that in mind, I'll just say, you know, as final comments from the three of you, if you're able to just kind of share with us why you have this commitment to making our community a better place for our children. And if there's just one thing you'd like to leave us with in that vein, in terms of what you are committing to do from your seat, from your role, that would make Jacksonville a place where my 8-year-old daughter would keep me from, it wasn't Jacksonville's fault, but we ended up putting this training out because she wanted her dad to be white. And that's what she told me, because she was afraid that he was not white going to work every day. And I just had no idea that she was thinking those things. What can we do from our areas that makes this place better for our students? And this time, whoever wants to go first. See, that's what happens when you do that. All right,
No,
Dr. Green. Oh, go ahead. Thank you, Director Bruno.
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Jacksonville. I went to Paxson Middle School at the time, Paxson High School. I've worked in Jacksonville my whole life. I was hired in 1994 for the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. I've been here 26 years now. I love this community. I love this agency, and I mentioned it before. I'm very proud of this agency. It's one of the best in the country in regards to its policies and the way it performs day in and day out. But it's because of the men and the women that are here and the decision makers that help guide this agency. We've poured so much into, and I say we, me, my family, into this agency and into this community that even when I leave this agency, or as I'm still a part of it, I want to see it flourish into the future. I want Jacksonville to be strong. I want it to be one of the best places in the country. And I know that I followed the legacy of some great people and management roles and administrative roles. And I want to live up to what they were, so that when I leave this agency, it's as good, if not better. And that's everything. That goes down to every side of this town and to this community, to everybody to have the opportunity and to work hard and to be successful and to be safe. Everybody wants to go home and be safe, and I understand that, and so that's what I want in my community, and I know that's what everybody else wants. Certainly the decent people, and that's the majority. I mean, that's 99% of what we work with in Jacksonville. It's the good people, and you know, we just need to stay focused on the small percentage of individuals that you know want chaos and disorder and you know criminal activity, and make sure that the other portions are safe. So, I mean, that's what I see from my chair and from what I'd like to accomplish in my time here. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I will go next. I think that it starts with adults who can teach and model unbiased behavior to the next generation. And having these conversations, we want to have young people participate in these conversations because, like your young daughter, you know, it's kids are worried about these issues. They see these things on the news and they're worried about them. And then bring them into the conversation and then listen to them, listen to what they have to say. And then they will hopefully, as they model that behavior, as they grow up, they will become the adults that will model it to the next generation. So basically, I'm committed to continuing having conversations like this, do everything at my agency that we can to prevent discrimination, and hopefully one day it will be not existing anymore.
Wow, to come behind Wendy. Wendy's pretty much said everything that I would say. It starts with, again, with the adults, with all of us who are interacting and engaged, whether it's through policy, behind the scenes, or the classroom teacher who's standing in front of our students. We have to acknowledge where we are, make a conscious decision that all students are a priority, and start figuring out what are the things we have to adjust or change in our actions, in the way we interact with students, so that our students feel comfortable enough to talk to us. Unfortunately, we are in a situation where we're trying to battle racial unjust discrimination and a global pandemic. And so the two are and I'm sorry, hurricanes. You know, we are every day either focused on one of those three issues in our school district. And it becomes quite challenging to keep moving this. Hey, this is a priority. This is something we need to be focused on. But we're doing it in such a way that, believe it or not, COVID-19 becomes an issue. Teaching students remotely is an issue. And one of the things we tried to make sure was that we didn't have discrepancy or underrepresented groups not being able to learn from home. The concern was, well, so if I'm poor and I don't have access, my child, I can't feel like I can't keep my child home safe. We came out and said, if you need a hotspot, if you need a laptop, we're going to provide it for you. We'll get it to you. If you need your materials, we made sure they had that. And another little unknown fact, we also still serve lunch to students who are learning remotely. So for a school district to engage in that type of work, that is real life equity in play. Seeing that we're going to make sure it doesn't matter where you live, your race, your ethnicity, your gender, we're still going to try to provide you the highest quality education that we can. And right now, we are being stretched to all facets of this community to try to make that happen for all students. And when this pandemic is over, what I'm looking forward to is are people coming back with a new perspective on life, a new perspective on love thy neighbor. Because right now we can't even be in the same room. We can't engage in conversation up close. We can't hug each other. And hopefully through all of this darkness, or whatever you want to call it, we're going to come out much better on the other side, where we're going to be kinder, we're going to be more empathetic, we're going to be more compassionate and passionate about what we do for children.
Well, Dr. Green, I definitely want to thank you for your leadership, for being with us today. We have never had to beg you to do anything. And there are so many organizations that is true for. You are always there and willing to support the work of the district or whatever on behalf of students. So thank you so much, Director Bruno and Ms. Benloss. Thank you both very much. And please thank your leaders as well for allowing you the opportunity to take this time today to represent your organizations. We did get this feedback from our folks that were presenting or participating on our training, and they wanted to hear from the city and JSO and Duval County Public Schools, and because of the three of you, we were able to make that happen. So thank you so very much. For those of us that are watching us, we see your comments on Facebook. So we are wrapping up just to make sure that we're getting finished in a timely manner, but we will definitely see those comments, share those comments back within our organizations. And I do want to highlight my co-facilitator, Ms. Vamicia Powell. She is the supervisor of school climate and culture for the district. And guaranteed, whatever you see there, if there's anything she can implement or anything she can speak to herself, we will absolutely be sure to get back with you all with some of the comments that were put there. We're ending here with a final quote. Good people are not those who lack flaws. The brave are not those who feel no fear. And the generous are not those who never feel selfish. Extraordinary people are not extraordinary because they are invulnerable to unconscious biases. They are extraordinary because they choose to do something about it. Thank you so much, V, for putting this quote here for us. Thank the three of you for doing something about it. And thank those of you that are watching this, like it, share it, and be sure to continue this conversation. Everybody have a great weekend.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Leathers and the Community Engagement Department.
Yes,
Fabulous
thanks,
job.
Parent Academy.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.